Hey, what's up? This is Tin Man Lee. In this video, I will share with you my 7 biggest tips for beginning photographers. I call it the 7 L's, which are exactly the things I hope to tell my younger self when I first started photography. Because all these mistakes can be deadly. Some of them are super controversial. By the end of this video, you'll know something that took me years to learn so that your photography will be greatly improved. So here are the 7 L's. Number 1, light usage. When I first started photography, I did it mostly only in weekends because I have a full-time job. After breakfast in the weekend, I would go to a place like a local park and then I would look for birds and animals. And when I found them, I got super excited. So I would just take out my camera and just try to autofocus on them and take a bunch of photos. And then I would show the photos to my friends and families. And they would always say, "Oh, Tin Man, you're a natural. You should be a National Geographic photographer." I felt happy. I knew I was good. Then one time I asked a professional photographer to give me his honest feedback. I didn't hear any feedback from him for days. Eventually, I asked him again. He said, "Well, you know, Tin Man, you seem to shoot everywhere." "What do you mean?" I asked. He didn't explain. It took me quite a while to realize he was talking about the light angle and the time of the day. That means that I never pay attention to all these things. You know, the word photography literally means drawing with light, which derives from the Greek. Photo, meaning light, and graph, meaning to draw. So have you heard of a painter called Rembrandt? He is super famous, right? You all know about the signature Rembrandt look where the lights always shine on the subject with the inverted triangle on the face and all. So he was the master of light angle. So when an expert look at your photo, they don't just look at the subject you photograph. They actually look at how good you use the light to tell a story. But hey, you may ask, we are not painters, we don't have paintbrush. Our subjects may show up at random time and random spots. So how do we really draw light with our camera? We don't have all this control. Well, our paintbrush in photography is actually the sun direction, and our footwork create all sorts of light on our subject. So photographers should be like martial artists with good footwork like Muhammad Ali, like moves like a butterfly. So when we are moving around relative to the sun, we create the light and shadow on the subject accordingly. And that is what highlights and shadows are so important for a photo. The better you handle the highlight and shadow, the better your photos are. And oh, your friends and family will never tell you the truth. Number 2, the second L, location selection. Real estate people always talk about location, location, location. I used to spend a lot of time in the weekend going to all the local parks. And in longer vacations, I would go to all the famous national parks or driving around just to look for birds and wildlife. I remember a time when I saw an osprey in Los Angeles. The osprey was on top of a telephone pole. I spent 5 hours after work waiting for the osprey to take flight. But do you know that I could actually go in April to a lake in Florida where there are hundreds of nesting pair of ospreys? So if you spend a weekend there in Florida at the right time, you could get photos of ospreys with all sorts of flying actions that you would take 10 years waiting at the telephone pole in Los Angeles. One time I met a photographer I admire a lot. His name is Paul McKinsey. He said to me that to be a great photographer, it is about finding one great location and go back to that same location again and again and again. Sometimes he would go back 30 times to the same spot within a few years. So the tip is to spend 80% of your time planning and preparing and researching. Many places you go, you never get great photos, and forget about those places. Those are only the places for viewing the animal, but not for photography. So same as real estate, location, location, location. Do your research. Stop wasting your time going to places with no good opportunity. And the third L, love of the glory or love of the subject. Let me ask you, if you truly love a person, would you manipulate them into doing something? When I first started photography, I saw some amazing photos of owls flying right into the camera with their open talent. I dreamed to take a photo like that. I thought the photographer must have waited for years for that once-a-lifetime amazing shot. And guess what? Later I find out that some photographers use live mice to lure these owls in. I was so disappointed. I lost all my respect to those photographers. It's cheating. They manipulated the animal, exploiting their natural instincts just for the sake of a photo. Sometimes the behavior of these animals will even change after you feed them. For example, like a coyote or a fox, a fat animal is a dead animal because they would always go near the road to look for food handed out by humans after they were fed one time, and they have a high chance to be hit by the vehicle. So don't bait. Also, a lot of stunning photos of birds. People play bird calls from their phone and speaker to lure them out. It put in a lot of stress for these birds, especially when they're in mating season. And ultimately, it is also cheating. So ask yourself, do you really love birds and animals, or do you just love the likes and validation of taking some fake photos? So number 4, the fourth L, the loss of freedom. So my theory in life and in photography is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which means treat others the way you want them to treat us. What I mean by that, I used to love to go to the zoo when I was a kid. I was happy to see animals, but I never used my brain to think about things. Most of the time, the animals is locked alone in a cage. Yes, there are some zoos that are more ethical, but if I were the animals, would I like to be locked up? When some photographers spend years in the field to get a nice photo, and if someone just goes to the zoo and take a close-up photo of the same animal and do not specify it, it is unfair. So Nampa and Audubon have articles about being truthful on your caption. Also, many photographers go for the shortcut to photograph game farm animals, and some of those facilities are really bad. Imagine they starve the animals so that when you pay them money, they bring the animals out from a small cage and use those food to lure them to jump and do whatever for you to take photos. It's just absolutely sickening. Tom Mangelsen, the legendary photographer that I admire a lot, has an article about why he doesn't support game farm, and I'll link below and check it out. Some time ago, a famous wolf photo that won the grand prize of Wildlife Photographer of the Year was disqualified after some biologists recognized that the wolf was actually a captive wolf that was trained to jump over fence. I mean, yeah, you can still take captive animals in the zoo and do the caption, but for me, I do photography because I think it is challenging and it's fun. When you take a photo of the animal in the zoo and when you post it, when people see it, in the future, when you get a really good photos in the wild, people will always think that you just take captive animals and there's just nothing good coming out of it. So I wouldn't even advise it. The fifth L, lying to yourself. Let me ask you, do you want your partner to fake it? Your photos tell people what kind of person you actually are. So what do I mean by that? A few years ago, one of the most prestigious photo contests that I just mentioned, Wildlife Photographer of the Year, a photo of an anteater. The judge found out that the photographer used a stuffed animal and staged the shot. And not just wildlife. I've heard that some landscape photographers, they would rearrange the 4-color leaves on rocks so that they can have certain pattern in their photo. And then some of them, they will use free transform tools in Photoshop to realign some subject. Some photographers would print some paper and then put it as the background and do the fake background. And then some photographers add fake fog and also add fake dust. The fact is, when I first saw those photos, I was blown away by the beauty of that. And when I realized that they actually added fake fog into it, I was actually angry because I feel like I was being cheated. And the biggest problem is that after knowing that these photographers added the fake stuff in, Anytime they post a good photo, I will start to question about it, and it takes all the joy of appreciating a photo from this photography thing. That is not good. So number 6, the 6L, learn from the wrong source. One of the biggest mistakes is you learn from something that is wrong. To me, nothing is more valuable than time. Yes, I know some of you may say that photography is just a hobby, so you don't think you need a teacher. Many try to learn from forums, when sometimes the people who post their advice aren't really that much better than you. And sometimes some of the photographers have special permits and they have special access to a place and they have 3 months in a place and they got some amazing photos. And if you ask them how to take those photos, they can't really teach you anything that is actually practical for your scenario when you don't have a lot of time to travel. So you have to think about the source of where you learn. I remember a few years ago, I went to Costco with a friend of mine. You know, sometimes Costco have some unexpected items for sale. And that time we saw they were selling pianos. I was like, wow, it would be so cool to get one so that I can learn to play. At Costco, I was clicking on some of the keys to play a few keys and ding, 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 you know, like that. It was bad. And then my friend sat down at the piano and then she started to play a few songs, like the Moonlight Sonata and those, and people started to circle around. It's beautiful music. And after a while, she got a little bit embarrassed and then we left. Then I realized that she is grade A in piano, and each grade she has to take class. And the reason she is so good is because she understands the language of music. Most people buy a camera and just shoot away like I press on the button, because it seems easy. But to move people, you have to learn the language of photography. For example, in photography, you are turning a 3-dimensional scenery into a flat 2-dimensional photo. So that means that everything is being squeezed 3-dimensional to a flat 2D. So for example, if there is a tree behind the person and if you take a photo of that person, due to that compression in the photo, the tree would look like it just stick right outside of the human's head. And that would be really awkward, really weird. And if somebody see your photo, they would not be able to turn their eyes away from that tree sticking out from their head. And that is one case of when the photographer doesn't understand the language of photography. And some people never pay attention to their distracting background of the photos. Those to me are documentary photo, or what I call a non-photo. Looking back, the time when I sign up to learn from master is the time I really know what I didn't know. It's overwhelming at first to attend because a lot of the people in those classes are very advanced and sometimes the classes are so expensive. But looking back is really the best investment I ever had, because nothing is more valuable than the time I saved. So the 7th L is limiting belief. Nothing ever works if you don't believe in yourself. When I first started photography, I was so blown away by all these stunning photos I saw in magazines. I immediately thought that I would never be able to get to that level. Who I was kidding, right? I had a 9-to-5 job, and there are so many social events, so many family obligations, and I thought I would never be good. Fast forward for a few years, I am able to take so many photos that I have ever dreamed of, and I have received a lot of recognition. All it takes is just one good photo and it will kickstart your photography career. So believe you have what it takes, and yes, you can do it. All you need to do is just to take the first step. And every time when you go out, believe that something magical is gonna happen. So these are my 7 tips for you, the 7 L's. I hope that you will find them useful, and let me know what you think about these tips and what you think about baiting and faking and all these things, and if you have ever encountered some of those. I would love to hear from you. So put your comments below. So I'll see you next time.